Do you want me to share my screen now?
Yes, go for it. And yeah,
Okay.
it's great to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. So I'm kind of amazed I managed to put this together because I'm leaving in the morning and I'm not really coming back till 2027. So I've been insane. But I did not write my talk. So I usually don't do this. I usually write my talk. But I practiced it like yesterday afternoon. It was exactly 30 minutes. So I'm just going to try to do the same thing I did. You guys can hear me okay? Am I going in and out? Okay, great. So this is my website on the left that you can visit. It actually doesn't look like that right now because I had a friend update it a little bit, but that's a Fukushima persimmon tree heavy with contaminated fruit when I went through Fukushima with a doctor working with the cancer clusters of children who have cancer as a result of the Daiichi nuclear accident in 2011. And then on the right is my blog called Hiroshima Mon Amour, based on the Marguerite Duras book and the film that I saw in high school that really inspired me. And I kept it pretty much until 2016. I first went to Hiroshima in 2008, and I did most of it then, but I wrote these long entries to just try to talk about everything I was going through and the work I was making. So these are just references that you can feel free to go to later. And let me see how I go forward here. Okay, here. So I grew up in Portland, Maine, in a pretty activist family. My parents were radical Catholic, sort of liberation theology activists. They built a school in Haiti and really worked against nuclear weapons and nuclear power and against war and for civil rights my whole life. And every August 6th, we went to the main square in Portland, Monument Square, to commemorate Hiroshima on August 6th. So that's my dad on the left. And sometimes we were the only people there. Sometimes we were joined by 20 or 30 people, but usually just a handful. And we would read from A-bomb survivor or Habak Shaw testimonies. And on the right is a banner that was at one of those commemorations by John Burke, who's now dead, the old man in that photograph, and my nephew, who's now all grown up. But this was a banner he did, Hiroshima, little boy being the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. And I did a show in Amsterdam in the Netherlands called Violent Violence. And I curated the show of 40 artists who dealt with violence. And this banner was in the show with 9 of his other banners. So Hiroshima sort of been in my consciousness from an early age. And I taught at UNC Chapel Hill for 27 years. And I now live in Irvine, California. But I met anthropologist Catherine Lutz, who did this book, Homefront, and it's an analysis of Fort Bragg, which is one of the world's biggest military bases in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which has one of the highest numbers of strip joints and pawn shops in the country. It also is one of the most international cities because the soldiers marry people from where we bomb and they bring them home and they live in Fayetteville. But anyway, I met her because for a different project, I used a quote by her that said, the past is not another country. And I used that in one of my projects. And so I reached out to her and we became friends. And she asked me to do the photographs for this book. So it was the best I've ever done. And that's my photograph on the cover of Parachutes Dropping Out of the Sky. And on the left is the first time we went there. We went to Hall Street, which is on this unpaved road at the end of the 20th century, right near the extensive county courthouse where 2 white neo-Nazi soldiers at Fort Bragg went to kill 2 African Americans so they could get the spider tattoo signifying that they had done that. One of them already had the tattoo, and they went and they killed Michael and Jackie Burden walking along the road. And the sister of them didn't plant, put these silk flowers and this cupid on the side of the road. And I was just blown away by this. I was just so troubled and moved that these are the people to protect us, and they're killing our own fellow citizens, out of racism and hatred. And I turned that image into a light box and I put it into this room. It used to be called it doesn't exist anymore. It was a small little modern museum. I filled the room and put the light box in it to sort of talk about what was happening. And there was a giveaway that people could read about what happened. It was called Bragg Murders, a Violent Cartography. So I was working on this with her. And when we were there, Clinton decided to bomb Baghdad in the second wave of the Gulf War. And it was the soldiers at Fort Bragg that were going to be flying the planes to drop the bombs. And I just wanted to really make the local and global connection. So I did this project called Protesting Cartography, or the book is called Bomb After Bomb, A Violent Cartography. And this was on the cover. And this was the last one I did in the series, although I've done more since. Like I just did one for Gaza and Yemen and Syria and Lebanon, because we keep bombing, but I don't do them as obsessively as I did then. But I put flag pins at all the places that I did drawings for that the United States has bombed. So it's not everywhere we bombed, it's everywhere I've done the drawing for. So this is the book, and Howard Zinn wrote the foreword, which was just an unforgettable experience for me to meet him and become friends with him, and that he agreed to write the foreword. He didn't even know me, and he was an amazing guy. And he said things like, if you don't imagine peace, or you can't imagine a world without nuclear weapons, it will never happen. Like you have to imagine it. You have to believe in it. And then these are just 30 of the 60 bomb drawings. They look really small in this image, but they're all about like 20 by 30. And they include a lot of nuclear sites. So on the left is the first nuclear test, the Trinity test, and I called it "We Are Our Own Enemy" in Alamogordo. As you probably all know, on July 16th was the first nuclear test, and then just a few weeks later, we dropped Little Boy on Hiroshima. So this is the hypocenter in Hiroshima on the right. And then did testing, and this is the reentry of peacekeeping missiles on Kwajalein in the Marshall Islands. And it's done from the picture below it. So I worked often from photographic sources or military images or historical maps and different sources. But then on the left is one of my favorite Japanese photographers, Hiromi Chishida. He's done several books on Hiroshima called Monument. And this is from the Peace Museum archive that I later worked in. And this is an image of black rain on a white wall. And I just think the not the symmetry, the synchronicity or the similarity between the images is striking. And then this is the Bikini Atoll, where we did 23 atmospheric atomic bomb tests. So I'm just sharing my work with you. I'm not really talking about like how we can stop nuclear war or end nuclear power, because that's like something we can talk about afterwards. I'm just sharing with you what I've done. The image on the left looks very banal, and I deliberately don't have a caption on it because I like people to just look at it and think, oh, these guys out in the cornfield. But I had a fellowship at Caltech for 16 weeks in 2022. It was the Huntington Art and Research Fellowship, and I wanted to work in their archives because, Oppenheimer came from there, and Bacher and all these people who worked on the Manhattan Project, and I wanted to research their involvement in the nuclear project. And come to find out, the detonators for Little Boy and Fat Man, the bomb dropped on Nagasaki, were in part designed at Caltech. And there's tons of stuff in their archive about nuclear, things that they didn't even know they had, things nobody had ever looked at. Before I went to Caltech, I just Googled radiation into their archive search, and this was the first image that came up. And these are two scientists, can't remember their name, George Beadle and Carl Ernst, and they're in a cornfield in Arcadia, this town near Pasadena, and they're studying mutant corn, dwarf corn that was grown from the progeny of seed from the Bikini Atoll. So they collected seeds that had been exposed to the radiation on the Bikini Atoll and then planted them near Caltech to see what would happen. So, it's just amazing how with information, the power of the image changes. So I went to Hiroshima in 2008 for the first time. And the first time I went to the Peace Museum, I could not make it past the first floor. They have this little room where they show documentary films. And these are just my phone shots of stills from the film, the shadows that were left at the time of the bomb from the heat and the flash. And so these are plants and the shadow of a man waiting on the steps of a bank. And I brought the book Bomb After Bomb to Japan to give it to people as gifts, because I was mostly meeting with activists and peace activists and people at the Peace Museum. And the essay in that book is by Carol Mayborn. It's called Blossoming Bombs, and it focuses on Hiroshima. And in that essay, she shows this picture by Anna Atkins. So you probably know Anna in the last few years, but she's a British botanist who's often described as an amateur botanist because she was a woman, but she was a botanist. And she actually made the very first photograph book of photographs ever, which was a book of cyanotypes of plants and algae in Britain. And this is a poppy, and a poppy is both a symbol of memory and forgetting. So Carol Mavor writes about the cyanotype as a sort of X-ray. And X-ray, again, is radiation, an image that goes into the body the way radiation from a bomb or nuclear power goes into the body. So when I was reading that essay in Hiroshima, it just dawned on me that I needed to make cyanotypes. Whoops. Okay. That I needed to make cyanotypes. So I went to Hiroshima to do something else, which you'll see in a minute. But seeing that image there really was inspiring. So some of you might be familiar with Barefoot Gen. It's a graphic novel series by Kaiji Nakazawa from 1976. It was required reading in Japanese schools until recently. The new mayor of Hiroshima no longer requires children in elementary school to read this book. It's a very anti-nuclear war book, very critical of the US. And I show this image because this is it includes the ACC, the commission that the US government built right after the atomic bombing of Hiroshima to study the victims. They did not treat the victims, they only studied them. So the top image is of it when it was built, and the bottom image is of it from where we lived. We lived in the dorms. I felt like I was in The Shining. I felt like a spy. I couldn't believe I lived in this place that was once full of, military scientists and soldiers and people studying the victims. So in this book, it says they built these buildings right on the top of Mount Hiji, which is a beautiful mountain, looking out over Hiroshima. They're like vultures perched on the mountaintop, watching for bomb victims to die. Yeah, then they swoop down and fetch the victims' bodies and turn them into lab slides. What kind of fools do they take us for? So before I went to Hiroshima, this is what I went there to do. So some of you might know that Henri Becquerel is the one who discovered penetrating radiation in uranium because he put uranium salt on a sun-sensitive glass plate. And it was a cloudy day, so he put it in a drawer, but he decided to process the plate the next day anyway, and he discovered that it had penetrating radiation. So I've been very obsessed with the idea, a lot of people are, but the idea that the nuclear age, the atomic age, and the photographic era are linked. They're very intertwined and they depend on each other in some ways. So I went there to make autoradiographs, which is what you call an image made from radiation exposing the paper or the film. And I took objects from the Peace Museum archive. I couldn't do this until the end of the 3 months because it took me a while to make connections and make this happen. But I put 10 objects on for 10 days in the Peace Museum archive basement. And this is the only one that came out. This is a fragment of an A-bomb tree trunk, and I call it lingering radiation. And I'm glad the other objects did not have any registration because you don't want these people to be handling objects that are radioactive. Like you want them to not have any radiation. But I was really glad that I got this image just because it conveys what I wanted it to convey, that these things do hold radiation. And it doesn't look like Becquerel's image, but you can kind of see a similarity. So that's what I went there to do, which I didn't do till the end. And then when I was there in the Peace Museum, there's so much at the Peace Museum, but this really struck me. This was just down in the basement in one of the little exhibition rooms about how it was when the doctor was taking out X-ray film from the vault and saw that it was completely exposed, that's how the Japanese knew it was an atomic bomb dropped on them. They did not know what kind of bomb it was. They thought it was some nasty chemical, but it was through the exposure of the X-ray film that they determined it was an atomic bomb. So again, this link with photography and the nuclear. So the other project I went to do along with the autoradiographs before I had the ding, ding, ding moment of the cyanotypes was this project, which is photographic contact prints of rubbings. So I took Japanese paper and I put it on the A-bomb trees. So 60 trees survived the atomic bombing in Hiroshima. Hundreds of others were instantly incinerated. You can get a map. You can go to visit them. I've probably photographed 30 of them. So I put the paper on the trees and I rub it with a black oil pastel. And then I brought the rubbings back to UNC Chapel Hill and exposed them in the darkroom on the paper. So there's a direct indexicality, the paper touches the tree, then the paper touches the paper. And they also kind of look like X-rays, like the negative imprint again, like a shadow. So these are rubbings of 2 of the A-bomb trees. And I did a whole bunch of rubbings. I'm not going to show you everything, but this is a rubbing on top of one leaf. It's a big leaf. from a Chinese parasol tree. So I rubbed the front and I rubbed the back on the same piece of paper and then contact printed it. And then down below, you can kind of see this wonky panoramic photo I did on my phone of a show that was at Santa Ana College a couple years ago, where they painted the whole gallery black and they lit the pieces. So it kind of felt like a mausoleum. It was a very powerful way to see these rubbings. And you can see the two leaves on the left. So this is the basement of the rest house in Peace Park in the center of Hiroshima, and it's where Mr. Nomura Aizo went to get paperwork. And so when he came back up after the bomb was detonated, everybody was dead in the building and the whole city was gone. His whole world was gone as he knew it, but he lived to be 86 years old. In this basement, you used to have to get special permission and put on a hard hat and go there. And I went a couple times. I thought it was powerful. And over on the left, way on the left, the little white stuff, those are like some of the paper piece cranes that people leave there. But if you go there now, this is all gone. They've cleaned it all up, renovated it, carpeted it, put some plexi over some of it. Now it's just part of this like really sanitized experience of the place. So it's kind of sad. I mean, history, things go on, things change. So I show this picture because the door, that steel door in the back, I did a rubbing of, and then that's the image on the left. And so there is this power for art to transform whatever it is we see, right? Like no matter what art you make, it's a transformation of whatever it is you're trying to deal with, depict or address or criticize or celebrate. And then on the right is a more obvious Japanese paper. I did a rubbing of the front of one side of the door with the keyhole and the other side of the door with the keyhole, also in that basement. And then this is one of the cyanotypes on the top, right? And it's of dead flowers from the Hijiyama Hill that we lived on. And I wanted to do them because I thought it would kind of look like an explosion, which it did. I was really happy it came out the way I wanted. And after I did that one, I discovered Shinpei Takeda's work. So some of you might know his family was near Fukushima, lived near Fukushima. So he collected soil samples after the nuclear disaster and put the soil directly on the photo paper. So it's also an autoradiograph, and the radiation in the soil exposed the photo paper. So it also looks like a celestial sky or an explosion. And then on the left is, some of you might get the Newswatch newspaper that gets sent out. If you don't, I highly recommend it. It's run by this couple, I think. Are they in Washington State? Do you know them?
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, that's right. Yeah, Wisconsin. I knew it was a W. So anyway, I get it. My husband and I get it. We always send them a little bit of money, but this was an image from their paper about car filters. So in Seattle and then Tokyo and then Fukushima City. And it just struck me how similar it was to these images. So all these images are about radiation and how similar, and they also kind of look like the Becquerel image again. And so the image of the flowers ended up as one of 5 billboards at the North Carolina Museum of Art. They were all about Hiroshima, and I just loved it in that setting. I thought it looked beautiful. And a lot of people ask me about the problematic nature of making beautiful work about something terrible, but it's a strategy for me and lots of other artists. Like, people don't want to necessarily look at things that are ugly or things they've already seen. That how can you get people to think differently about things? So I think beauty is a strategy and can be subversive. And so this is the cover of the After Hiroshima book, is the same image, and it's bilingual and it has a great essay by James Elkins. So these are 2 more A-bomb trees in Hiroshima, and I solarized them in the darkroom, which means I flashed the light on when they're developed to the swing and reference flash of the atomic bomb. And then this is another A-bomb tree in the playground at a school, and these schoolgirls are trying to catch butterflies during recess. And Bo Jacobs, who I think talked to your group recently, he and I are very good friends, and we hung out a lot together in Hiroshima whenever I went there. And he wrote 20 poems for 20 of my photographs, and they were in this book called Toxic Imminence: Decolonizing Nuclear Legacies and Futures. And I won't read his whole poem, but I just love the last stanza. When a child of Hiroshima plays with butterflies and bugs living in a tree that survived a nuclear attack, the world thumbs its nose at death. This is real power, and it plays and grows. And then, so this is the very first cyanotype I ever made, and it's called Atomic Mask, and it's of a steel beam from the dome, which you see in the background of the picture on the right. So this is the part, you can see the dome that stands as a witness. And that's a fragment of a steel beam. And I put it on the paper and exposed it. When I washed it in the tub and saw it come up, I literally did cry because I just couldn't believe how this steel beam had been transformed into this other thing, which the beam was, sort of 3D. I can show you in the next picture, you can see. So you can see it on the left there, how the beam has this, but then has this part sticking out of it. So that part sticking out of it, can I go backwards? Yeah, this little thing. Can you see my cursor? Yeah. Okay. So this little thing here is caused by the shadow of that cross beam, the thing that's sticking up. And it looks like you could just hold it in front of your face. That's why I called it atomic mask. And I love this picture on the right. I did hundreds of color photographs. I barely printed any of them, but I love the photo on the right because you can imagine, like, if the bomb went off now, all these people would disappear. I mean, I don't love that. I hate that idea, but I love that it captures the sort of humanity and also the survival that, Hiroshima is a thriving city. It did not just disappear forever. It is an amazing city. So I've gone back many, many times. I've gone, I think, 10 times. So over the course of the times I go, I redo some of the same artifacts because I like to do them differently. So this time I stood them up on the paper. So it has much more of a dimensional quality, and it's called architectural fragments. And again, these are both fragments from the steel beams from the Peace Dome. And I did a whole bunch of these. I have like 25 or 30 in this series because I like to reference the process of exposure and the different intensities of it. So when I first went in 2008, my husband, I should say, is an epidemiologist. His name is Dr. David Richardson. He was in charge of the UN 10-year report on radiation. He worked on Obama's Radiation Advisory Committee. I don't mean to brag. He studies the effects of radiation on workers all over the world. France right now, he works for the French government for their Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which I can't remember what it's called, IRSN, but I can't remember what that stands for. And he was just arguing to the government in French that they should compensate women who get breast cancer from exposure to radiation at nuclear plants and nuclear facilities. So we went there with our kids who are now 23 and 20, but they were this young when I took them, and they went up to A-bomb trees and said they were sorry. And I show this because I cried almost every day there, because to imagine these people just incinerated by the A-bomb just like killed me, because this happened to 200,000 people, when we dropped the bomb. And I also am just glad I raised them the way my parents raised me, just being aware of what's going on in the world. So this is one of the artifacts in the Peace Museum, a bottle that was totally melted and transformed from the heat of the A-bomb. And then these are two cyanotypes of it that I placed differently on the paper. So you can see they look really different, and they don't look at all like the bottle. Again, this like total transformation. And I should say about the transformation that it is from, I'm taking an A-bombed object that's been exposed to radiation and exposing it to the sun, which is another form of radiant energy, but it's peaceful in a way. But it's, and I'm an American, it's layered. There's lots of layers to it. So this is the A-bomb bank that was used as a bank until 1992. It was one of the few buildings that was left standing after the atomic bomb. This is it in 1945. And when I was there in 2008, you see it down below. And there's the tram, the trolley, that they still have a few of the trams that survived the A-bomb that run. It's pretty amazing. And then it's a cultural center. Since 1992, it's a cultural exhibition center, and they mostly focus on nuclear issues. And I've had several shows there, solo show, group shows, but this show went up right before I got there. I had a fellowship in Hiroshima at the Hiroshima City University for 3 months through the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, JPS. And this show was with the Atomic Photographers Guild that I'm also a member of. And it's called From Trinity to Hiroshima and Beyond, the Nuclear Age Through the Eyes of the Atomic Photographers Guild. And it was really great to be able to be there. And actually, I did lots of rubbings in that bank that I ended up showing there. I think we might. So this is an example of how the artifacts are brought out to me in these plastic bins with all this archival paper. And you can see in this image that, they're falling apart, the rust, they're crumbling, they're not going to last forever. And on the right are some of the cyanotypes of those objects that when I made them, I thought they were failures. I didn't really like them. They weren't really clear. They were blurry, but I decided to hang them in the window in the bank during my solo show because it allowed light to come through them. And again, it referenced exposures and different levels of exposure. And then this is in the bank. This is a detail of my solo show in the bank, which you couldn't hammer anything into the walls. And I have a system museum boyfriend, so me figure things, and the people at the World Friendship Center helped me. It was really a hard thing. I had to like hang it in a day. But these are cyanotypes of a broom from the Peace Park and a shovel from the Peace Park. And I think of the broom as something that sweeps up after, sweeps up the rubble, and a shovel buries the dead. And so they're very symbolic to me. And I love ladders. I photograph every ladder I see, but ladders to me are a symbol of like connecting heaven and earth, or an escape route, or a possible, just it's utilitarian. I just love what they look like. So the one on the left is an American orchard ladder. It actually has nothing to do with Japan, but there are no ladders in the Peace Museum. But in 2013, there was this old wooden ladder in my neighbor's garage near the World Friendship Center that Sean and I have stayed in. And I took the ladder out of their garage and made the cyanotype of the Japanese ladder. I don't know if it survived the atomic bomb. It was very old, but I don't know. And the neighbors weren't there. I didn't talk to them. I just did it. So this is a teacup and another teacup that is fused to a broken saucer. These are A-bombed artifacts in the Peace Museum. The Peace Museum has 90,000 artifacts, most of them donated by the survivors. And then this is the resulting cyanotype. And again, just can't believe the transformation. I just think the object of the teacup fused to the broken saucer is really powerful. Fukushima, here's the persimmon tree heavy with contaminated fruit, a straight image of it. And on the right is on a small street in Nagasaki, and there's 5 persimmon trees that survived the atomic bomb. Some still bear fruit and some don't. I believe this one does not still bear fruit. And unlike Hiroshima, that they mark the trees, they give you a map, they really take care of them. They don't really do that so much in Nagasaki. They're very different in their approaches to how they remember and mark the atomic bombing of their cities. Hiroshima is a self-declared city of peace. Nagasaki is not. I mean, not that they're a city of war, but it's just a different feeling. And so this woman on the street tends these trees. She takes care of the trees. And I stayed with this Hibakusha A-bomb survivor family, and they took me all over Nagasaki and brought me there, and including to this place, which in the background, you can see these 2 big trees. You just see the leaves, but they're 2 500-year-old camphor trees that survived the atomic bombing. And up one of them is this spiral staircase. You can walk up and look inside the hole in the tree of the things that were flung inside the tree at the time of the bomb. But this is on August 8th, the day before the bombing of Nagasaki, on August 9th, and they're commemorating it. And at the point in the story where the bomb is detonated, everybody that was listening fell to the ground. And we just happened to be there when this happened. And this is the only image I made. And I was just I was crying. I cry a lot when I'm in Japan. It's a very intense place. This is when I was with the doctor driving through Fukushima. And this is a farmer tending his field across the street where there's a radiation monitoring station. But where the radiation monitoring station is placed is where they've scraped off like 5 feet of the earth and paved it and resoiled it. So it's decontaminated, which Bo Jacob says you can't decontaminate. How do you say that? You redistribute it. So if you move that across the street, the reading would probably be much higher. And then I've just sort of manipulated in the darkroom. In the bottom image is a picture of Fukushima City from my hotel room that I've solarized. And then this was in 2015. I don't know if it's still like this, but when I was there, we drove miles and miles and miles, and there are miles and miles and miles of these black plastic bags filled with contaminated matter. Animals, dirt, rubble, construction materials, just all over this beautiful countryside. And it looked to me like they were building these huge sort of storage hills or dump areas for them. I don't know where all this stuff went, but it was really powerful. I was invited there in 2015 to do a project in Iwaki, which is a town in Fukushima where the town was evacuated. The schools are still closed. We're still closed. In 2015, we stayed evacuated. And I was invited by an artist who had moved there from Tokyo because he built a house on a river so he could fish and he could grow a garden. And now he can't eat the fish because they're contaminated. He can't eat the food that he grows because it's contaminated. But of course, people do eat the food because they live there. And mushrooms, as some of you know, suck up all the radiation from the soil, and they're really a source of contamination. Anyway, I did the cyanotype of the mushroom and the Queen Anne's lace, and this mysterious circle down here is inexplicable. I have no idea what caused it. The mushroom did not touch it. I'm not saying it's radiation because it doesn't make sense. Radiation wouldn't make a mark like that, but it's a very weird thing that happened. And so this is what I did in the old school. I was given a classroom in the evacuated school, and I dragged the infirmary bed into the classroom, and I put cyanotypes on it of all the implements in the infirmary, like the things that you cover an eye with, the little scissors and tweezers. And in the house we were staying were these baskets. And so I did a cyanotype of the baskets, and I brought the baskets into the room. And you can see that the cyanotype looks really different on the left because I applied the chemistry. I wanted to reference the tsunami and that it was a nuclear accident and not a nuclear bomb, because they're not the same thing. You know, so sort of what John was talking about earlier is nuclear power isn't nuclear weapons. There is a difference. And so how do you mark that through art? Like, how do you represent it differently? And on the chalkboard, I had these photograms where I placed objects on photo paper and just exposed them to light. So these are contaminated chestnuts from Fukushima, a bone that I found on a beach in Fukushima, and a piece of melted plastic. And then after that project in Fukushima, I had a show at Gallery G, which is my favorite gallery in Japan, in Hiroshima. And it was up for Hiroshima Day on August 6th, which was really powerful. And this is how they hung the work, which blew my mind. I loved this installation of it. And it included images from Fukushima and Hiroshima. And I don't think nothing in this is from Nagasaki. So Hiroshima and Fukushima. And then this was my favorite A-bomb tree in Hiroshima. It's an A-bomb willow tree that I walk by every day. It's at the base of Hijiyama Hill. And you can see on the left in 2008, you know, looks very different than in 2023 when I went, like the whole left side has fallen off. And it's still propped up in the same way, but they've cleared out all the green and people have left peace cranes on it. So it's still living, but I don't think it's as thriving, you know, as it was. And there's at the Wilmington College in Ohio, which is a Quaker school. They do an annual peace symposium, and I was invited to work in their archives, and I was going to curate a show, but then COVID happened. So I couldn't do the show, but they had the budget. So they did 13 billboards throughout Ohio of my images, which was like, I never saw them because of COVID, but this was one of the billboards of that weeping willow tree. And here it is as the billboard. And I couldn't believe it ended up on this billboard with the posts for the billboard that looked like the posts for the tree. It was just really this uncanny visual power. I don't know. So these are my friends, Mireille, Mila, and Leona Toshiro. I've become very close friends with them. They're third and fourth generation Hibakusha A-bomb survivors. And they participate in this annual play that happens every year in Hiroshima called Grandchildren of Hiroshima. And they took a break from rehearsing it to come out and make this cyanotype with me, which it was the day before I was leaving, and I knew I had some cyanotype paper left. So I laid it all out. I didn't know how many pieces. I didn't know what they looked like. And I laid it out like this without really consciously thinking. And it looks like a summer kimono, like a yukata, which I didn't plan. It just happened. And I also didn't know that that bottom piece was so different from all the other pieces. So it just really worked. And this one also became a billboard, and there it is as a billboard. And I love how they look like they're rising up into heaven now. And so at my Caltech fellowship, this was the first drawing I did where I just did this, I think the first week I was there, to just try to keep everything together. And I just hung this on my wall where I was living so I could keep it organized. So Christie, Oppenheimer, and Bacher were all part of the Manhattan Project, and they were at Caltech, and just, you know, the nuclear physics, rocket systems, the forced sterilizations. No women were there until 1970, all that sort of stuff. And I did cyanotypes of the missile tips that are in the Caltech archive. So I didn't know this, you probably didn't know this, but Caltech made 2 million military rocket missiles for World War II, which I did not know they did that, but these were 2 of the missile tips they had in the archives. And I just arranged them in 2 different ways on the cyanotype paper. And on the top left is one of the transparencies from the archive of a nuclear test, and there were 2 of them. So I layered them in the darkroom by flipping them opposite is a black and white print from that color transparency that I layered. And I started a group in 2023 called Swans, Slow War Against the Nuclear State. And it's 8 women. I can't tell you all about them, but 3 of them, their fathers worked on the atomic bomb and on the first nuclear power plant in the country. They're in their 80s. And me and a couple other activists, and then a new member from New Zealand and other people. So are we just lost time, which is really incredible. The headline, it was an anti-nuclear art show opened in LA County, then the US bombed Iran. And the article was very long and it went on and on about nuclear politics. And it was very good. And we had a symposium with Jim Walsh, who's a nuclear moratorium expert from MIT, who some of you might know, and my husband, David Richardson. They did a presentation and then I moderated this discussion. And it also made it into Hyperallergic, which is a very popular online art magazine, How Photography Helped Build the Atomic Bomb. So, you know, when they did the nuclear tests, I think they had 80% of the world's film supply to document the nuclear tests. So you know, they're always aligned. This is another transparency from the Caltech archive of a nuclear test and my black and white image made from that image. And then towards the end of my fellowship, there were all these boxes of unopened photo paper, and I was testing them and they were all fogged, which now I realize they were probably fogged from radiation because there was a radiation sign on a door in the basement where I was printing these in these abandoned dark rooms that I got working again. But at the time, I didn't think it was from radiation. I just thought they were old, but I think they were exposed to radiation. So because they were fogged, it means if you put it in developer, they'll turn gray or black. So you can't really make a normal photograph on them. So I decided to see what would happen if I tried to paint a nuclear explosion. And there have been, well, there's been thousands of nuclear tests, but there's been 528 atmospheric above ground nuclear tests. So I did 528 chemical drawings on this paper. It was kind of crazy. I was there for the last 2 weeks, like morning, noon, and night, just cranking these things out because it was really important to me that I make them there and I make them with the materials there. So these are 3 nuclear tests. This is Harold Egerton. You probably know him. He did the famous picture of the drop of milk called Coronet, that the milk comes up and then a bullet going through an apple. Those are his 2 famous photographs, but he also made a Rapatronic camera and did stroboscopic photography. So there were 1/1000th of a second exposures. And this is of a nuclear explosion. He would photograph, he was with the Atomic Energy Commission documenting the nuclear tests. And this is my chemical drawing based on his photograph. So many of them I just did from my memory of the quintessential mushroom cloud, but others I did from looking at images. And then I showed them all at Colorado Springs, the university there. They had a downtown gallery. I was going to do a completely different show, but it was a few months after my fellowship. I said, look, would you be willing to put all these up? They said yes. So they did 4 rooms of all of these drawings, and they're organized by year and the number of the tests that were done per year. And it was really powerful. And they're all different sizes. And I had a printout of all the tests and which countries did them. Oh, okay. Good. That's the last slide. So I will right now, and we can talk. And I know I just said a ton. So, but you can ask me anything, or if you guys want to talk about other things. Thank you so much for listening to all that.
Thank you, Ellen. That was really fascinating, and just seeing the role of art in this work and this movement. We want to probably wrap up by 6:45, so I think we'll have time for 2 questions.
Okay.
So if folks have questions for Ellen, put your hand up or feel free to jump in.
You can ask me anything.
What's a cyanograph? How about that?
Oh, a cyanotype. Sorry,
Yeah,
a
cyanotype.
cyanotype is sun-sensitive paper, and so you put on it, you expose it to the sun. I mean, you can do it with the UV light table, but I prefer to do it with the sun for 10 minutes. When you take that object off the paper, it leaves a white shadow. So it's one of the earliest forms of photography. It was created by John Herschel, Sir John Herschel, who was a scientist. Yes, Joanne and Alpana. I guess we'll have the two questions.
Yeah, you did so wonderful job, and um, uh, initially you touched those papers to take the pictures, and everywhere you were there. So, well, you were already safe there.
Well, when I first got to Hiroshima, I had a Geiger counter, but I realized I'm not going to walk around with this Geiger counter. It's weird. I mean, people live there. People are born there. They live their whole life there. They die there. It's less radioactive and contaminated than many other places in the world. But Fukushima, definitely, I don't think I was safe, but again, people live there and people work there. Like when you go to the exclusion zone and you are turned around on the road because you can't go through it, there's people standing there all day in the exclusion zone. So I don't really feel like relatively it's that dangerous, but I don't spend a lot of time there. And I did leave my shoes. I threw my shoes away. People told me, Bo Jacob said to throw my shoes away. So I threw my shoes away, but I don't know. I mean, my husband is exposed to far more than I am, but we all are exposed to radiation all the time we don't have a microwave. I try really hard to, never hold my phone up to my head, all these things, but it's everywhere.
Well,
And
thank you so much for doing this. Let us
yeah,
know.
you're
Uh,
welcome.
thank you.
You're welcome. Joanne?
Joanne, Joanne, you're on mute.
I also wanted to commend you. Wanted to know, is there any place where you have a permanent exhibit of your
A
work?
permanent, well, I have work in lots of collections. And sometimes they're up, sometimes they're not. Permanent. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I mean, I do one of the cyanotypes. I don't think I showed you the one, but it just got into the National Gallery collection. A collector bought it and then just donated it to the National Gallery in DC, but I don't think it's up. I have work in the Library of Congress that you can ask to see at any point. They have an original cyanotype. I have work in the National Library of France. I mean, I have work in collections that you can go see, but I don't think it's always up. But I have shows all the time, but it's rare to have a permanent exhibition.
Yeah, just because your work is so good, but if it's temporary, that means only some people get to see it.
Right, which is why I love books. That's why I love
Exactly.
books because they're permanent. I am going to be having a show up in Oregon at do you remember the name of that school, Sean? I can't remember the name of the school. Uh, Not McAllister. I can't remember the name, but it's in Oregon in the spring of 2027. So that it's not in Washington, but it's in your area. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, but
Yep.
thank you again. Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And
And
have a safe trip wherever you're
thank
going.
you. Thank you. Do we have time for Louise's question, Sean, or should we?
Louise, if you promise to be quick.
Yes. Yeah, I'm curious the response that you might get from people who don't know very much. Do you remember any responses that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of people who see work, as you can imagine. Like at that show in Colorado, most people who went to see that show, and there were a lot of people there, they didn't even know about nuclear tests or how many we did, or that the US had done over half of them and where they were. And many of them were done in New Mexico and Alaska and Puerto Rico. And, all we bomb ourselves, or that, and they're really kind of blown away. I mean, as a teacher, I was an art professor for decades. I do think of work as sort of a pedagogical tool and a way to educate. So I think overall, most people feel like they learned something looking at it, but mostly they're just sort of shocked. I mean, I did have somebody say, "Well, did you work for the CIA?" when I showed my bomb drawings, because they could like, "How did you know all this?" I was like, "No, I did not work for the CIA, but I did have to research my butt off." I mean, I was raised in an activist family. I thought I knew everywhere we bombed, but I didn't know. I didn't know. We all just don't know. You have to really dig. So the people were kind of shocked. They are often surprised, but I think most people.
Thanks.
Well, Ellen,
Yeah.
thank you so much
Thank you
for
all.
speaking. We can give a virtual round of applause.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I
Great,
appreciate it. And it was
grateful for
nice
coming
to
on the
talk
short
to you. And
notice.
Yeah, and I wish I could stay for the rest of your meeting, but I really do have to finish package. So
Yeah.
thank you all. And it means a lot to me. I love talking to groups like this because you guys care and and I know it's not really activism, but I do think art is a form of activism. So,
Amen.
so thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.